Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Animas Corporation, providing insulin delivery products for people living with diabetes and part of the One Touch family. And by Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes with the world's first continuous glucose monitoring system that sends glucose readings directly to your compatible smart device. Live life on your own terms with Dexcom. Hey, it's Stacy. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacy Sims.
This week, 3 fantastic guests, each doing their part to help others with diabetes. Adam Brown is the author of Bright Spots and Landmines, a new book with information he wishes he'd had years ago.
I really wish that someone had said that to me as a teenager. Like, wow, if you keep your blood sugar in range, you'll be a better student, a better athlete, a better human being.
In our community connection this week, almost 20 years after being diagnosed and starting a little event called Dancing with Diabetes, Elizabeth Forrest shares how the event has grown and what it means to her.
It's been the positive sort of outlook that I could spin diabetes into. And so I fill all my free time with it, and it's become, obviously, it's a passion.
Recently married, Elizabeth also shares what it was like to have a bridesmaid hold her CGM at the ceremony and a gluten-free honeymoon in Italy. And checking in with Bike Beyond, Sierra Sandison, the former Miss America contestant, talks about why she decided to join this cross-country trip.
Cycling's always been a big part of my life. I always wanted to go across the country. When I got diagnosed with diabetes, I didn't know if that would be possible. So when this opportunity came up, and it was specifically for people with type 1 diabetes that are just normal, like not professional athletes, I knew I had to do it.
It all starts now on Diabetes Connections. Welcome to another week of the podcast. I'm Stacy Sims. Really glad to have you along here on Diabetes Connections. If you're new to the show, we try to educate and inspire by sharing stories of connection, talking to celebrities and influencers in our community, as well as healthcare companies, the tech folks that make a big difference, as well as everyday people dealing with type 1. You know, maybe you're not going on American Ninja Warrior. Maybe you're not writing a bestseller, but I still want to hear from you, because just getting through day to day, we can all learn a lot. So again, if you are new and you're listening perhaps on Facebook or through another social media outlet, Twitter, go ahead and get the app. We have a Diabetes Connections app now for Android and for Apple. Easiest way to listen to the show and take it with you wherever you go. And of course, it's a free app. You can also get the show on any podcast platform like Apple Podcast Player, which used to be iTunes, or Google Play, or iHeart, or wherever you get your fabulous podcasts. So this is a really big episode this week. And I had mentioned this a couple of weeks ago that I think all summer long, you know, there's just so much good stuff going on that the episodes might get longer. There may be more people in them. And I hope that's okay with you. And I say that because, you know, if you talk to the podcasting experts, they will say, oh, you have to have a 25-minute episode, or, you know, it's only got to be a commute. Well, I don't know. I think that's kind of silly. But let me know what you think. If the episodes start getting too long, or you really just want one focused interview, you know, per episode, this show is here for you. So drop me a line, Stacy at diabetes-connections.com, or, you know, Facebook, Twitter, that sort of thing. So this week, you're going to be hearing from Sierra Sandison as we check in about Bike Beyond. Then you'll be hearing from Adam Brown and his great new book. Then I'll be talking to Elizabeth Forrest about an event she started when she was just a kid called Dancing with Diabetes. And boy, has it grown. I'm also giving away 2 books this week. I will tell you more about that. You'll hear it after the interview with Adam. He's going to sign 2 books for 2 lucky listeners. And that's the whole episode today. So stick with me. A lot going on. What's going on in my life this week? Camp. As I'm taping this episode, both of my kids are away. So my husband and I have had some time to ourselves, which is always wonderful. We did a little traveling. We played a little golf. And my son's at diabetes camp. My daughter's away at a school program. So I know it's funny if you're listening in the Northeast, you're thinking, my kids are just about to get out of school. I grew up in New York and I'm still amazed. My daughter's school lets out at Memorial Day. The South is just a little different. Of course, my kids go back to school in mid-August. But I'm really hoping to tell you more about Benny's experience at diabetes camp because this is his 6th year. He's been going since he was 7 years old and he loves it. He's got a great group of friends. The staff is just amazing. They're really personal friends of ours now. And every year, cool stuff happens. They meet celebrities, they do fun stuff, they learn, and they always come home, at least my son always comes home, a little bit more independent. I know how long that lasts was anybody's guess. So I'm excited to see what he's taken away from camp this year. And I'm hoping to share that with you in the weeks to come. Quick word from Animas. You know I love working with our sponsor, with Animas. And after 10 years in July, wow, I love Benny's Animas insulin pump. I met a lot of parents recently as we do camp drop-off. I know it shocks you to find out that I go around and I talk to lots of people. It was really great to hear why so many families at camp love the Animas experience as well. They offer a choice of insulin pumps so you can choose the one that's right for you or for your child. And with kids, it's great that the Animas pumps really fit an active life. I love talking about our experience with Animas. They make it easy with great products and incredible customer service. To find out more about Animas, just go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Animas part of the One Touch family logo. That music means it's time to check in on Bike Beyond. This is an incredible cross-country bike ride, 20 people with type 1 diabetes, going from New York City to San Francisco all summer long, of course, organized and brought to you by the great folks at Beyond Type 1. And as this episode is airing, I believe that they will have just left Ashley, Ohio. They were scheduled. The group is making a lot of stops along the way to celebrate and to meet people and to rest up. And they were supposed to be at a diabetes camp on the 19th. So hopefully that's a lot of fun. The next event will be a pop-up benefit concert in Nashville, Tennessee. That's Wednesday, June 28th. And that's a pretty cool event because you've got people with type 1 like Crystal Bowersox and Eric Paisley, professional musicians, Grammy-nominated musicians, who will be there at the Listening Room in Nashville. It is also a fundraiser. The whole Bike Beyond event is a fundraiser for Beyond Type 1, which helps fund other diabetes organizations. So a lot of information at diabetes-connections.com on how you can donate, and they're having raffles and cool prizes and things like that, how you can learn more, attend the events along the way, and just follow along. So the biker I want you to meet this week is someone that you may already be familiar with, and that is Sierra Sandison. Sierra is 23, which always makes me kind of shake my head a little bit because I feel like she should be so much older. She's already done so much, not only in our community, but just for can I say a kid? Show my age. But Sierra, of course, is Miss Idaho 2014 and famously wore her insulin pump on the Miss America stage. She sparked the social media movement Show Me Your Pump and continues to inspire people because of that and her wonderful attitude. What's so cool about Sierra, and you'll hear in our interview too, is, she's gorgeous, of course, but her mission really is more about education and math and science and things like that. And it also turns out that, well, I'll let her tell the story, but her dad inspired her on this cross-country bike trip. So here is my talk with Sierra just before she set off with Bike Beyond. Sierra, it's great to talk to you again. Thanks for coming back on with me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
I was looking back. You are one of my very first interviews. You and I talked, I think even before the show had officially launched, but your interview ran in the first month of the show, June 2015. So thank you so much for taking a chance on a new podcast.
No problem.
What have you been up to since then?
Oh man, let's see. So I published my book right around that time, and then I've been majoring in mechanical engineering since then. And so I still speak for diabetes conferences often. And so that takes up a bunch of time. And then I have my t-shirt company where I make funny diabetes t-shirts, sugar lining swag. Yep. And then I'm taking like 1 or 2 classes at a time towards my major until I can get to a place where financially I can go to school full time.
Wow, it's hard to remember that you are, I'm going to sound 100 years old, but that you are so young. You've already done so much. I feel like you're getting your PhD already, but no, not the case. That's wild. So how do you have time to do Bike Beyond? Why did you decide to do this?
So it's always been at like literally the top of my bucket list that is written down on paper, like number 1. Because my dad did it when he was 16, and my sisters and I have always grown up like hearing his awesome stories from that trip. And it's just such a cool thing for him to be able to say.
He biked across America?
Yeah.
Wow. Was he by himself?
No, he had a team too.
That's cool.
Yeah, but when I got diagnosed with diabetes, I kind of thought, like, I figured it would be possible for me to still go, but it'd just be really, really difficult unless somehow I got like good enough to be on Team Novo Nordisk or Team Type 1 or whatever their current name is. And I'm definitely cannot be a professional cyclist, but, and then I've always been really into cycling, and that's how I prepared for, Miss America, was riding my bike like 50 to 100 miles every weekend leading up to the pageants that I was competing in. So, cycling's always been a big part of my life. I always wanted to go across the country. When I got diagnosed with diabetes, I didn't know if that would be possible. So when, this opportunity came up, and it was specifically for people with type 1 diabetes that are just normal, like not professional athletes, I knew I had to do it.
I've been following you on Instagram, and you've been posting your training, and it sounds like, I mean, first of all, how do you find time to train, and how is it going?
So April was really hard to find time to train. I had the flu, and then I had strep, and then I had finals. So that was a rough month. But before that, and since then, finals have been over. So I've been able to get on the bike like pretty much every day. So that's been going awesome. And then, yeah, I don't know. It's been super fun. We have Specialized Bicycles are giving us all sponsored road bikes, and they are so nice. I have, I'm in like a women's cycling club here that goes and rides a group ride twice a week, and they're all super jealous of how nice my bike is. It's pretty funny. But yeah, training's been going really good. I have a couple past injuries that have been kind of bugging me, which is probably like my biggest fear for the trip, is how those are going to react when I'm riding like long distances day after day after day. But other than that, training has been going really well, and I feel really good and really strong.
All right. I probably shouldn't ask you this, but are you nervous? Are you nervous? It's a long trip.
Yeah, I'm so nervous, especially this week, because it's like less than a week away that I get on the plane, and I'm just like constantly freaking out because I don't know. I know I'm in good enough shape physically to handle it, but it's also just so like such a big adventure that I'm taking on, or big physical task. I don't know. I'm really scared.
Well, I've also talked to a couple of the other participants, and everybody seems concerned that they're going to be the one to hold the group back. But I don't get the impression that anybody else cares. No one seems to think, oh, she better not hold me back. Everybody seems to think that they are the one. You all have already met or talked, right? You're in a group together?
Yeah, I've met one person in person that I met, like he lived in Pittsburgh and I had a layover there. So we got coffee, but I haven't met anyone else in person, but we all talk like on Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook pretty much all day, every day. That's like what my social media has been like dedicated to like recently, is those group things. But, yeah, I'm really excited. The people are all awesome. And I feel like I have a lot in common with the whole team. And so that's really calmed my introvert nerves down quite a bit. Hopefully, if someone else is holding us back, I'm definitely not going to mind, because that just means it's not going to be me.
Are you okay? Now, I have to ask this. I've met you several times in person. You always look absolutely amazing. I mean, I know you're doing presentations. I don't see you when you're at the gym, but are you concerned that as, being known for Show Me Your Pump and being known for Miss America pageant, that people are going to expect you to look fabulous?
Yeah, that's always kind of like a concern. And it's like probably my least favorite thing about pageants, because for me personally, pageants were my way of like breaking beauty standards by wearing my insulin pump. But then like everyone, when they hear that I'm Miss Idaho, there's always like if I don't have makeup on, they're always like, give me a little confused look before saying like, oh, that's cool. And I'm like, so that's always frustrating. But this bike trip, I think I have a pretty good excuse to not look good all the time. My beauty routine is applying 100 SPF sunscreen every day.
Perfect. So, that's the best. That's the best.
Yeah. And hopefully it'll kind of be like a little bit of a rebranding for me. Like that beauty queen won't be the only thing I'm known for. So people will be a little more lenient about.
Oh, that's funny. Well, but I hope people understand that, while you are known for the beauty pageants, that, as you said, you're majoring in, what was it, math and engineering?
Mechanical engineering.
Yeah. So, more than putting on mascara.
Yeah.
What will this ride look like to you? When you look back, what will success look like to you on this ride?
I guess completing it. I know it won't be like my fault if I get injured, but that will be really devastating for me if I get sick or injured along the way and can't complete it. But I don't know. I guess what I would like to come out of it is I'd like to get back in really good shape and meet a bunch of awesome friends. And a big goal of it is to be able to show newly diagnosed kids that anything is possible while living with diabetes. Because I think when I was first diagnosed, it was so scary. Like those first 2 minutes, maybe am I going to die? Or am I going to go get some kind of shot or surgery right away and be completely fine? Or how long am I going to have this disease? Can I reverse it by eating healthy or something? And can I continue doing the things I love? And it was a bunch of scary unknowns. And then I actually went online and found Phil Sutherland was one of the first stories that I read. And he was in charge of the bike team and Bikes Across America with type 1 diabetes. So it was really cool to see that. And I think us doing this and filming the documentary on it will be really encouraging for kids in the future who are diagnosed and just don't know what to expect.
I'm talking to you before the ride begins, so I know you can't really answer this. But a lot of this involves stopping along the way and hopefully meeting people in those local communities that come out to see you. Have you all talked about that? I mean, are you hoping that people want to learn more about your story? As you said, maybe newly diagnosed people to be inspired, or just, are you worried that you're going to be too tired to talk to people?
Let me think. So our first pop-up party is, obviously the very first, before we even start, we have a pop-up party in New York. But then our next one is a couple weeks down the line, I feel like. So I'm hoping, my vision for energy-wise is that the first couple days are going to be pretty hard to go back-to-back, and then hopefully my body will get used to doing that back-to-back. So I'm hoping, I have definitely thought about what if I don't have any energy at the end of every day, but I'm hoping that after a few days it'll get easier.
Harder so far to train for a pageant or train for this ride?
Probably pageant, because biking was a huge part of my preparation for pageants, in addition to a bunch of other stuff as well.
And I know you're a huge reader. When we talked a couple of years ago, that was something that you brought up. You read, a dozen books a month? Are you going to are you worried about missing that? You can't really read on a bike.
And we have very limited room in our suitcases, but I do have a Kindle. So instead of reading this summer, my plan is actually to, do you know what Khan Academy is?
Oh, sure. The math website,
so I'm going to go all through Calc 2 / integral calculus, because I'm going to take that class next semester, and it's really, really hard. So I'll probably not be reading too much and instead focusing on trying to get ready for my Calc 2 class in the fall, if I have any free time at all. I'm kind of nervous that we're not going to have any downtime for me to do that.
I want someone to draw a cartoon picture of you on a bike with your pageant sash from Miss Idaho, with your thought bubble from calculus. I want to see sine, cosine, you got it all. I love it. Yeah, my kids like Khan Academy a lot. My daughter's very into math and science, and I try to quiz her and help her, and I have no idea what I'm talking about, so she's used Khan Academy quite a bit. That is great.
He's awesome.
That is great. Before I let you go, you had mentioned your T-shirt company, and I know you're not here to sell that. I know you're talking about Bike Beyond the trip, but it is so fun, and we've given things away on the podcast before. How do you come up with the ideas and the sayings and the fun stuff that you put on those shirts?
I don't know, they all kind of randomly come to me. Some have been inspired by like memes by other people who I've tried to give credit to if I can find the original source. So the original t-shirt was the reason I started the company in the first place is because I came up with the idea for the Diabadass defined dictionary definition shirt. I love that word. I think it's fun and funny and really powerful and empowering, but it also can like come across as like a bad word to a lot of people. And I wanted to like lay out the definition and also just like be proud of my identity as having as being a diabetic, I guess. I think like a diabetic has a really icky like connotation. And for me, like obviously the fact that my pancreas doesn't work really sucks, but for me, having diabetes means that I do a ton of hard work all day, every day, and I'm constantly fighting this battle. And because of it, I'm really strong and I'm good at persevering, and that's something I'm really proud of. So for me, like the very first t-shirt that I came up with was really wanting to like redefine what it meant to be diabetic, and instead I used the word diabadass because that's way cooler. And I don't know, just take pride in the work that I do every day to keep myself healthy.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me before you're ready to, as you say, get on the plane and then get on the bike. And I hope we can check in with you once you're cycling across the country. We'll see how it goes. But thanks again.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
I love talking to her. You know, I interviewed Sierra a long time ago for the podcast, really one of our very first episodes. If you want to go back and listen to that, very easy. Go to diabetes-connections.com. There's a search box in the upper right-hand side. On mobile, it's right in the middle. And you could type in any keyword and the episodes will pop up. Sierra, Miss America, whatever, however you want to find her episode. But it was a lot of fun, and I look forward to hearing more from her, of course. Wow, throughout the years, she is just getting started. And much more on Bike Beyond. You can join Sierra's team. You can join any of the riders' teams or just donate. There's a link at diabetes-connections.com that'll take you there and learn all about it. Coming up is my interview with Adam Brown. He is the author of Bright Spots and Landmines. And I do first need to get in a word from Dexcom, by the way, who also sponsors Bike Beyond. So this all works out really well. And, we've been dealing with type 1 diabetes for 10 years now. Benny was diagnosed in 2006, just before he turned 2, so 10 and a half years ago now. And I'd heard about the teen years, but like a lot of parents, I just thought we'd be different, right? We're going to do this right. Well, here we are, and I did not realize it's not really about attitude, at least not us yet. It's the incredible physical changes and those wild hormone swings. And I cannot imagine managing diabetes during this crazy time without the Dexcom continuous glucose monitoring system. We can react more quickly to highs and lows, adjust insulin doses with advice from our endocrinologist. I know the G5 Mobile is helping to improve Benny's A1C. CGM-based treatment requires finger sticks for calibration, may result in hypoglycemia if calibration not performed or symptoms expectations do not match CGM readings. For more information, go to Dexcom.com. You're going to hear from Adam Brown in just a moment. Stay tuned after the interview to learn how to win a signed copy of his book. And then listen to our Community Connections interview with Elizabeth Forrest from Dancing with Diabetes. She's going to share her story, how this small event became a really big deal. Plus, how do you do a T1D gluten-free honeymoon in Italy? A lot more coming up, but here's my interview with Adam Brown. My guest today is the senior editor at DiaTribe, where he also writes a column called Adam's Corner. DiaTribe is a huge resource, including a diabetes forum, including several diabetes forums, newsletters, a blog with more than 100 writers, and even recipes. Diagnosed type 1 as a teenager, Adam is also the head of diabetes technology and digital health at Close Concerns. He's written his first book, Bright Spots and Landmines, which we're going to talk about today. Adam Brown, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Stacey.
Well, let's talk about this because you're busy. With all of those hats that you're wearing. Let's back up though and talk about what was going on in your life when you were diagnosed. You were about 13 years old?
Yep, 12 years old. Wow. And kind of classic teenage or preteen diagnosis, losing weight and feeling sluggish, and went to the doctor and got the diagnosis and was obviously crushed and crying and didn't know what would happen to me and did very poorly with my diabetes for a long time. And I think part of that, I addressed that in the introduction to the book in terms of just the diabetes tools that we had at the time, the diabetes food advice that we got, which was, you can eat whatever you want as long as you take insulin for it. And that made things really challenging for many years.
And when we're talking about your diagnosis, this was about 15 years ago, if I have the timing right. So we're talking the mid to late 90s, which we don't really think about as, the dark ages.
I know.
Of diabetes. But what were you using? Do you remember when you were diagnosed what they gave you? Was it rapid insulin yet, or was it still like twice a day?
Yep. So Rapid had come out. Lantus had just come out, but I actually started on NPH. And then within a year, got on a pump, but was still, doing maybe a few finger sticks a day because I was a teenager. And so when I say that, I think when I say the tools weren't that great, I mean, we didn't have CGM, which I think is has been such a game changer for so many, including myself. I think that's been really the biggest one that's come out.
By saying it wasn't the dark ages, it doesn't mean it's fantastic. It's not fantastic now. But right. Yeah, exactly. It has changed an awful lot. My son was diagnosed in 2006, and a lot has changed since then. And you're right, the CGM being the big game changer there. So tell me about Bright Spots and Landmines. This book it's not a really long tome that you have to, wade through. This is a help. This is just here as a guide. It's a help. It's quick. Why Bright Spots and Landmines? Tell us what those terms mean.
Absolutely. So Bright Spots is an idea that I picked up from an awesome behavior change book called Switch. It's by Chip and Dan Heath. And the idea is to look at things that are going well and to figure out how to do them more often. And when I read this, I had this kind of aha moment, like, wow, that is the complete opposite of what most of us do in diabetes, which is to focus on the mistakes and the things that aren't going wrong and try to do less of them. So a big theme of this book is that bright spots are these really important things that we should be focusing on more and trying to do them more often. And the key question is that last part. So, when my blood sugar stays in range, like what do I eat and how can I eat those foods more often? And so this book is focused on, there's 43 bright spots in the book. So things like, eat fewer than 30 grams of carbs at one time, or walk after I eat and when I have a high blood sugar. Focus on today reasons that keeping my blood sugar in range matters. And so those are examples of bright spots. And I think it brings a very different lens to diabetes, at least than we were told at diagnosis and that I lived with for a very long time. And then landmines are the converse of that. So that's more this idea of mistakes. And it's called landmines because the idea is, what are those mistakes I make that explode into these out of range blood sugars, So the one I always talk about in the book is the hypoglycemia binge. Blood sugar goes low, go to the fridge, eat way too much, go way high afterward, take a rage bolus, go low. So the key with landmines is, what is my plan of attack to avoid them? So with hypoglycemia, what I do is I talk about this in Bright Spots and Landmines, is I have an automatic correction. So I want something that's quantity limited, that I don't want to overeat, and then I can change the exact amount based on the circumstances. So for me, that's glucose tabs because, they're not tasty, and that's kind of the point, So that's the concept of Bright Spots and Landmines. And what I talk about in the introduction is bright spots outnumber landmines in the book by 2-1. And that's very, very intentional because there's this research from this positive psychology professor, Barbara Fredrickson, and she talks about the ratio of positive to negative in, our thoughts and emotions and feelings. And she says a 3-1 ratio is ideal for like flourishing and being extremely happy. And so I try to get close with 2-1, and that's a big theme of the book too.
Well, that is interesting because, as you said right off the top, usually we're saying, here's what not to do, right? Here, to live well with diabetes, you can't do this. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned looking at your vegetables and try to go lower carb, but try to remember that why having your blood glucose in range matters today. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Because that really sticks out to me. We don't, especially as a mom of a kid with type 1, we're always worried about long-term complications and, what is going to happen if he doesn't do this every single day. But concentrating on today, tell me about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we were diagnosed, we got the classic advice, take care of your diabetes so you avoid these long-term negative outcomes, amputations and blindness and kidney failure. And I think there's two challenges with that message. One is obviously it's really negative, so it sucks to hear. And the second is that it's really long-term for people newly diagnosed, or even if you've had diabetes for 10 years and you've been taking decent care of yourself. And that just creates a challenge because it's very easy to rationalize not taking care of your diabetes today because the consequences don't happen for many years. So one of the first bright spot in the mindset chapter is what I call this today reasons. And I actually capitalize today in all caps because I think it's so important. So the idea is, when my blood sugar, what's the why in diabetes? And I think the best why is today reason. So when my blood sugar is in range, I have more energy. I think better. I'm so much kinder to my girlfriend and my coworkers, and I write better at DiaTribe, and I have more energy to ride my bike, which is something I love doing. And what I talk about is I really wish that someone had said that to me as a teenager. Like, wow, if you keep your blood sugar in range, you'll be a better student, a better athlete, a better human being. And I think maybe I would have taken my diabetes more seriously, or at least, checked my blood sugar more often and tried to keep it in range. And that's a very big theme of the book. And it comes up a couple other times in the exercise chapter too. I think we also think of exercise as this long-term thing that we should all do to stay healthier. And again, I try to focus on today reasons to exercise. So, when I exercise, I just am a better person. I'm happier. I have more energy. I write better at work. So I care a lot about that message in particular because I think it's more positive and uplifting than the long-term negative advice that we often hear in diabetes.
Yeah. We were very fortunate because our endocrinologist always says to my son, I mean, he said it to me when Benny was 2, and now he talks to Benny more than me, but he says, you want to keep your blood sugar in range as much as you can for several reasons. And he always says, number one, so you feel really good today. You don't want it to stop even playing sports or acting or doing anything that make you happy today. And then he said, and I want you to think you can't think this far ahead, but the other reason is so like when you're 85, you still feel good. And he lays it out, but he's always stressed that now, and we are far from perfect, trust me, in terms of management. We're not one of those putting our 5.2 A1Cs out there. That's not my philosophy as a parent or as a podcast host. But we try.
And there's a fantastic book for people who are interested in this idea of the time perspective. It's called The Time Paradox, and it's by Philip Zimbardo, the famous Stanford prison experiment psychologist, and John Boyd. And I actually had a bright spot related to this, but I cut it because the mindset chapter was just getting too long. And they talk about how all of us have different time perspectives. And the dominant ones are some people are very future oriented, some people are very present oriented, and some people are very past oriented. And we all have a mixed time perspective profile, but most of us are dominant in one. And so when I read this, it totally blew my mind because it's exactly the challenge in diabetes, which is, I think for people who are very future oriented, avoid long-term complications might be a pretty good motivator. But what they argue is that if you're too dominant in one time perspective, there's consequences to that. And I think in diabetes, for people who are future oriented, like it's just exhausting and it's easy to burn out. And so I think these today reasons are this idea of present orientation. And then probably the theme of the book, in past orientation, there's two ways of looking at the past, they argue. And one is past positive and the other is past negative. And past positive is bright spots and past negative is landmines. And they argue that past negative is a very unhelpful time perspective and you should try to minimize it as much as possible. And past positive is something you should try to maximize. So, their test for this is, hey, tell us about some of the most important experiences of your life. And some people will talk all about the awards and achievements and great things, and other people will talk about the challenges and setbacks and things. And that's kind of an interesting test. But what I liked about the book is there's a test you can take to get your time perspective, and then also tips for changing your time perspective. And I think some of that is infused in Bright Spots and Landmines a bit, but the mindset chapter was getting too long, so I couldn't actually have like a bright spot on that. But yeah, that's kind of the backstory on this today thing, which is pretty interesting.
That's really interesting. You know, I remember I've seen your column over the years at DiaTribe, but one that really stood out to me and probably many other people was the food experiments that you've done. You know, last year you did like a 2 or 3 month kind of eating experiment. Do you mind talking a little bit about that? Because it was a little lower carb and a little higher fat. Do you mind sharing some of what you learned?
Absolutely. So this was so my column in DiaTribe has evolved into kind of a grab bag over the years, but it does focus on food, mindset, exercise, and sleep. If you look back at all the columns, and some of my favorite ones have been these food experiments where I'll change my diet, I'll track all my exercise and eating, and I use this app called Lose It to track, when I do these experiments, to track my calorie intake and the percent carb and protein and fat and my CGM data, and then I share what I did and what I learned. And all of these have taught me so much just about, even though I've found benefit to eating fewer carbohydrates, when you actually compare like eating low carb versus eating high carb and then seeing the impact on glucose and insulin dosing, and I always learn something. And so the one I did, I've done several of these on this topic of eating low carb and then switching and eating high carb and looking at the difference. And obviously I study science all day, right? So I'm the first to admit, like, these are not super scientific experiments. I mean, I try to control as many variables as I can, but I'm one person. I have my own biases, and so all of that creeps in, but I do try to be as rigorous as possible. And so the one I did last fall was, I think it was a 65% fat diet and then 15% carb and then the rest protein. Mm-hmm. So, people who call this low carb, high fat, or LCHF, and I eat pretty low carb, but when I switched to even lower carb, it also still improved my blood glucose numbers and diabetes burden and quality of life. And so I talk about that also in the food chapter of the book. And I think one of the themes from all of those experiments is just that you are your own control group, and you can test things in your life and see the impact with CGM or with glucose meter and try different things and see what happens. And that's a really cool takeaway and uplifting, I think, for people with diabetes. Like, we can all experiment and try new things every day, whether it's in food or other areas.
And just to be clear, when you're talking about low carb here, I think I remember it was about 90 carbs a day. Does that sound right? I mean, it wasn't like 15 carbs a day. I mean, I just want to be clear as you listen that there are different degrees of doing this. And obviously, I'm not here to give nutritional advice. And I know, as you said, you're your own control group. But I always like to be careful about that. This was not a super low carb. It was just more controlled.
Yeah. So in Bright Spots and Landmines, I talk about, my target is kind of less than 30 grams at one time. Mm. I think this is a nice number. Obviously, like, what if I eat 31 grams? I mean, I'm not really focused on like the 30 grams as a line in the sand, but I think it's a good general rule because it's easy to remember and it's a reasonable number for people who might be eating a more higher carb diet. So yeah, I generally eat about 70 to 120 a day, with about 90 as the average. And I think the key is, a lot of my carbs come from fiber, which doesn't have a huge impact on glucose or any at all, depending on how much is in what you're eating. So yeah, I think, the ketogenic crowd, which is very, very low carb, high fat, is you generally have to be under 60 grams per day to be in ketosis. So I don't make it down that far, but I've still found tremendous benefit to, 70 to 120 with an average of 90 a day.
The other issue that you mentioned was sleep. And I wrote that down and put some stars around it because nobody I know, diabetes or not, really gets enough sleep.
Yeah.
How do you tackle this?
It's a great question. So the sleep chapter of the book is actually the one that I wanted to cut. And it's funny because...
See, sleep is always a low priority. It's terrible.
I know. It's shortest. I wanted to cut it. So it's funny when you write something like this and I think I had about 50 people read it at various stages of the process. And some people loved the sleep chapter the most. So I said, all right, I got to keep it in. And the sleep chapter is both about diabetes strategies around sleep, because I think it's a tough piece to tackle, and also how to just get better sleep. Like what's the bedroom setup look like, and how much light are you getting, and just little tips and tricks like that. So one of the things my girlfriend and I do, I think one thing that's really important is to have accountability to someone in the house so that you're both really motivated to get more sleep. That's really helped me. One of the things I have is I have a yellow light alarm on my phone that goes off at 9:30. And that's to say, like, hey, bedtime's coming soon. Better start wrapping up what you're doing. And then a red light alarm at 10:30 p.m. that's like, okay, time to get ready for bed. And I think that has helped to some extent just keep me aware of what time it is and how I need to be making moves. And it's funny because why two alarms? Like if you have one alarm, I find at 10:30, I find that you just turn it off if you're doing something interesting. So having two alarms is really helpful. In terms of diabetes, I mean, closed loop devices are amazing overnight if people can access them, and obviously more products are going to be coming out in the next couple of years. And this is something I study in my writing at Close Concerns every day. But I think a huge key for me around sleep is just eating around bed and before bed, and trying to keep eating to a minimum and really focusing on, getting the basal dialed in, and then having an eating routine that's more predictable. So when I just eat too much before bed, I mean, I'm just going to have high blood sugar all night, generally speaking. But yeah, I think sleep in terms of blood sugars is really challenging for just those of us managing diabetes on open loop, because your basal rates can vary by 2x from night to night. So, one night you might need half as much, another night you need twice as much. And this is from studies of automated systems. So I think that's actually a refreshing reminder for people. Like, wow, why is this not perfect? Because like physiology is making it really challenging for us to keep blood sugar in range. So I think sleep is definitely probably the biggest work in progress for me, especially in recent months, trying to the book gets over the finish line. But a big piece of it, I think, is routine, and then also just kind of your bedroom setup, which are things that I talk about in the book.
I like that alarm. I may have to do that. I need an automatic shut off. I need someone to tuck me in, right? Like I do to my kids. Give me your phone. Turn off the light. I need a mom to come over to my house and take my phone away.
Just one more piece on sleep. I think the cool thing about sleep is there's a lot of really small things that I found helpful, like limiting light exposure at night, So, I'm one of those weird people that showers before bed, and I just shower in the bathroom in almost complete darkness with a nightlight on. Little things like that, or just not having a bunch of lights on in the apartment at night. Getting a better mattress, I think, has helped. So there's even if like getting to bed early is challenging, I think there are still ways to improve sleep quality that aren't that challenging.
Well, yeah, I used to wake up for work at 3:00 in the morning. I was a morning radio show host, so I had all sorts of tricks. You'd go to bed as early as possible. You have the lights blocked out. Immediately you wake up, you put the light on. It was terrible. But I loved my job. I did that for more than 10 years. I loved it, but no, thank you anymore. You mentioned looping or OpenAPS. Are you using one of those systems?
I started trying it a couple months ago. Yeah. So Loop is the one that I've been trying out.
Okay. And I'll just, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but if you're not familiar, I will link up something at diabetes-connections.com. But in a nutshell, and Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, looping refers to when you have found an older model Medtronic pump, something that you can actually communicate with an external device. And then looping is a program that was developed by somebody else that you can use your iPhone to basically control the pump so that some of it is automated. Do I have that right?
Yeah, and it's basal. It's basal only modulation, so it's hybrid closed loop, just like you'd see in the 670G in terms of it's not giving me automatic boluses.
Right. So you still have to bolus when you eat, or do you have to correct much?
Well, this is an interesting point. So it kind of ties in with what I talk about in the food chapter about diabetes burden when you eat fewer carbs. So a lot of the closed loop community talks about how challenging meals are because insulin works slowly, and even when you change basal rates, it doesn't impact blood glucose for a while. So on a low carb diet, on an automated basal system, it's kind of fully automated. Like I don't really take boluses unless I'm eating a huge amount of food. And on loop, I generally announce that I'm eating a meal, like I'm about to eat 10 or 20 carbs, but no, you don't need to correct much is the short answer. But I think a huge piece of that is because of just the foods that I eat. So if I was eating, the diet I ate as a teenager, I think I would have to correct all the time because changing your basal rate is like steering an oil tanker. So it's just a very slow way to impact your glucose. So these systems will get better as they add automatic boluses in commercial products, but I think actually closed loop performance during the day is very driven by what you eat.
And I would also like to add, if you're not familiar with looping or open APS, when Adam says he's announcing, he's not actually verbalizing it. He's telling the system. I like that. I like that visual though. I'm announcing.
Yeah.
It's like me when I'm with my son. Did you bolus? We're announcing like that. Ugh. Too funny.
Hey, Alexa, I'm about to eat creatures.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, boy.
That's really funny. You've written this column, this Adam's Corner, for a long time. Mm-hmm. Any feedback that you've gotten over the years that has surprised you, or any columns that have resonated that you've been surprised about?
Yes, great question. Well, I think generally I've been surprised at how many people read it. And I think when I started out, I didn't really know what to expect. And so that was a big motivating reason to write this book, was because I realized wow, that a lot of this super actionable and kind of experimental content really resonates with people. Maybe I should bundle it all into one guide of stuff that, has been the most useful. I think the food experiments always really resonate with people. And I think what I've been surprised by, the food is first in the book for that reason. I think food is just so dominant in diabetes, and all of us are always trying to figure out, what to eat, what can I make that's fast. The stuff that I really think is a game changer is mindset. And I wrote this really long column on motivation actually a couple of years ago. And I'm so proud of it. I think it's such an awesome overview of just motivation and diabetes and how to have more of it. And I think the response, in terms of just people that read it was kind of meh. And that, I think that surprised me because, as we started out with, this idea of motivation and long-term versus short-term, it's so challenging in diabetes. And so I thought this column would be like the amazing tour de force on motivation. And I think that surprised me. So maybe it was badly titled, or maybe motivation is such a turnoff for people in diabetes. But
yeah, I wondered sometimes too if motivation is hard, and I know enough that I think if they don't know you well enough, people feel like, well, this is just going to be another, rah, get out there and do it.
Right. Yep.
That's funny.
But overall, the feedback has been extremely positive. And actually, writing this column in this book has been like some of the most meaningful work of my life. Just when you get the emails, and I'm sure you get this doing this podcast, when you get the emails and see the reviews and it's making a difference in people's day-to-day lives, like it's just such a huge wind in your sails. So
it really is. It is wonderful to get that feeling. And you've made the book available. It's a different way of putting it out. I'm kind of dancing around it here, but this book is cheap. I mean, you're not even making money, right? Are you giving it to a charity? Tell us about that, because it's a pretty low cost. Yeah.
So this is kind of an interesting story. When I finally committed, I was like, all right, I'm going to write a book. I looked into, writing a book and how do you get a publisher, and what you do in nonfiction is you have to write a book proposal, which is like a business plan for your book before you write the book. And so you have to get an agent ideally, or sell the book to a publisher. And based on this business plan, they'll make a deal with you. So I was spending all this time writing this proposal, like why should this book exist and what is it going to add and all this stuff. And I had this point of immense frustration where I realized, oh my God, I'm spending all this time writing a proposal and I'm not writing my book.
Wow.
So then I came back to the mission of the book, which is like, I just want to help people with diabetes by sharing useful information. And so we decided to self-publish it through DiaTribe. And the model is one that we spent a lot of time working on. But the idea is you can get it as a PDF for free if you go to diatribe.org/brightspots. And alternatively, you can name your own price. So if you want to give $5 or $10 or $15, you can do that too. And you just have to put in your email and you put either free or name your own price. And any donation, that's all donations to the DiaTribe Foundation, which is a nonprofit. So I don't get anything from that. And then the paperback on Amazon is priced at cost. So we're not making any money from on this project overall, just because, it's expensive to launch a book. And then the Kindle version is $1.99. So what I love about this model is it's like the cheapest we could possibly launch the product and launch the book rather, and anyone can get it for free if they want to. So I think just coming back to my mission of the book, I'm just so elated with how that turned out.
What about people who say you're kind of crazy? Like, why would you do this and then not profit on it at all? I mean, it's really nice, and maybe I shouldn't ask that question, but there's no ulterior thing going on that we're missing, right? You're just trying to help people.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's completely altruistic. And actually, I think people are weirded out by that. Like, I would have expected way more, DiaTribe readers to have downloaded the PDF at this point. And I think part of that is probably like, wow, giving something away for free that's extremely high value is a really rare thing nowadays. So I'm actually totally fine with that. And again, I think this comes back to like what I find meaningful and purposeful in my life. And it's like sharing useful information that helps people with diabetes live better. And so like the currency for me for this project is like the emails I get and the reviews. And writing a book is, like, generally speaking, not a great way to make money. So, I mean, it's tons of hours. It's lots of stress. It's lots of your personal money. So, writing books is not a good business, but I wouldn't have done it if my goal was money. So my goal is just to help people and share useful information. So it is completely what it seems. There's no ulterior motive here, clever tricks coming up my sleeves.
It's funny that I even have to ask that question, isn't it? Kind of sad. That's what we all go to is like,
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. So what's next for you? You're going to do this again? You're going to continue with the columns?
Yeah, great question. It's funny. I was asking my girlfriend, like, because I've been doing some of these print interviews, and I was asking her, like, hey, what questions would you ask me, if you were interviewing me about this? And she was like, well, what about, like, what's next? And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's always you just finished this big project, and we're all like, so.
All right. So
what have you done for me lately?
I know, it's so funny. But, it's a great question. And I think, there'll be tons of columns related to this book coming out in DiaTribe. So, yeah, people don't want to read a giant this isn't even a giant book. It's a very short book. It takes like 3 hours to read. But if people don't want to read a whole book, we're going to chop it up and put it out in columns in DiaTribe. So that's a huge area of focus. I think, getting this into as many people's hands as possible is a huge focus of mine, however that is. So, can we get someone to sponsor like print copies for anyone that wants one? Can we hand it out to healthcare providers at conferences? I've thought about I've had a couple requests for other languages already. So one person wanted German, another wanted Spanish. And so I think, once the book launch craziness dies down, thinking about other languages would be really neat. I've also thought about doing an audio version. So there's no shortage of ideas, actually. I think what I'm really focused on is just making sure, every day I'm checking like how many people have downloaded it and purchased it, because that's the metric for success for me. I mean, how many people have this in their hands? And So I'm trying to think of all kinds of ways to make sure that happens.
You know, one thing we didn't talk about, and I did find interesting, is that while the focus is on type 1 diabetes generally, which is what you've lived with, there is advice in here for people with different kinds of diabetes. And that doesn't generally happen, you know, that it's all kind of in there together.
Yeah, so it's funny you say that. Actually, my focus in this book is diabetes in general. And I actually never mentioned, I spent hours agonizing over this, but I had many people with type 2 diabetes read it. I had many people with pre-diabetes read it, and many healthcare providers read it. So my goal is that this appeals to people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes and people with pre-diabetes. And so that's why my bio on the back of the book doesn't say type 1 diabetes.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I don't mention type 1 diabetes in the introduction. And I know to listeners who have type 1 on this podcast or affiliated with type 1, maybe that sounds weird, like I'm trying to hide the fact that I have type 1. But it's actually the opposite. Like, I don't want to isolate people with type 2 who feel like, oh, it's a type 1 diabetes book, like there's nothing I can benefit from in that. So I think we actually spend a lot of time in diabetes focusing on the differences between type 1 and type 2. And obviously there are some, but we actually have a lot in common. And I wanted this book to be super widely applicable. So I do think like insulin users will get a little bit more out of this book than non-insulin users, just because I do talk about insulin dosing in a lot of places. But my goal is that anyone with diabetes, type 1 or type 2, gets benefit from this book. And the early feedback from both groups has been really, really positive. So while I do have type 1, that was a huge mission of mine from the start.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. My husband has type 2, and we talk a lot in our family about, you know, it is obviously there are big differences, but there are a lot of similarities as well. So yeah. I'll see if I can get my husband to read the book. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Adam, was there anything else that you wanted to mention? Because this was terrific.
Awesome. No, I mean, I just want to thank you for all you're doing to inspire people and share information on your podcast and give them hope. And I feel enormously privileged to come to work every day and get to help people with diabetes, however that is. And so thank you for having me. And I feel like really honored to actually have written this book and to get it out into the world and to have the support of DiaTribe to really get it in people's hands. And I just want people to read it, even if they spend like 20 minutes reading the chapter summaries. I hope that they get something out of it and something they can implement in their life.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for spending some time talking about it. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
To learn more about Adam or the book, go to diabetes-connections.com. And here's how we're going to do the contest, right? I'm giving away 2 signed copies of Bright Spots and Landmines. And as you heard him say, there's a lot of ways to get this book. I think it's wonderful what he's doing. But this will be a neat way for you to win a paperback copy. We're going to give away 2 copies of it, and he'll send it to you. I will post a contest link on Facebook on the Diabetes Connections page. It will be obvious which post it is. It will not be the only post about this episode because there's a lot going on in this episode, but it will be a contest link. In that link, comment and tell me about one of your bright spots or one of your landmines when it comes to diabetes. It can be about you. It can be about your child. It can be about your husband, your wife, your educator, your endo. Tell me about one of your bright spots or landmines, and we will share on a future episode. I will pick 2 comments at random, and then Adam will send you the books. In our community connection today, Dancing for Diabetes. Now, this was originally formed in the year 2000. This was like a neighborhood fundraiser. You've probably done this. We do a spaghetti dinner just about every year, right? You do something to raise money, but then, it's you, your friends, your family, and you do it, you give the money, and that's it. Well, Dancing for Diabetes has just expanded in some incredible way to the point where it's an annual benefit show. This is in Florida, where they have award-winning dancers and nationally recognized performers come in. They have to turn people away. And Elizabeth Forrest, who started this event when she was diagnosed at age 10, has also turned it into year-round events, ways in which the community can get together. One of those events is Touched by Type 1, which is happening on June 24th. And Elizabeth invited me to come and speak, and I would have loved to, but we have 2 weddings that day. That's going to be a crazy day already. So I'm hoping to go to this event next year, or maybe Dancing for Diabetes, which happens later in the year in November or December. But Touched by Type 1 is coming up, and I wanted to have Elizabeth on to not only talk about the events, but to talk about herself and how it went from, a 10-year-old's idea into now 17 years later, something that has touched so many more lives. So I started out by asking her what it was like, her own diagnosis at age 10.
It was back in 1999. I was 10 years old. I remember it as if it was yesterday. I was in the 5th grade, and I loved school. I loved going to school. I loved learning. I loved coming home and talking about my day, and I loved interacting with everyone at school. And about a month before my diagnosis, I actually just got very sick out of the blue, and I never got sick as a child. So it was very disturbing to my parents to see that, and it was confusing at the same time because, like I said, never, ever got sick. It was very strange. And the times where there would be something small, I would fight my parents and say, I'm okay to go to school, I can handle it. And so about a month before the diagnosis, I was just too sick and too weak, and the sort of similar symptoms that almost everyone experiences, extreme weight loss, thirst, frequent urination, things that now make complete sense. But at the time, just being a little kid running around, being thirsty in the Florida heat was nothing. So I remember all that. And I have 2 younger sisters. It was around Halloween, and they went trick-or-treating. And I actually stayed home to pass out candy to everyone. I remember that so vividly. But the diagnosis process, thank goodness it happened. Thank goodness we found out that I had type 1 diabetes, because almost immediately I was able to bounce back after that, after being put on insulin, and could move forward and just start being healthier and start feeling like a 10-year-old again. So that was kind of a brief synopsis of my memory of the diagnosis.
Had you already been dancing?
So at that time, I was taking dance classes, but very, I should say, nothing too much, very basic, just starting to get into it. Had done one recital, took a few classes with one of my sisters leading up to that. But after my diagnosis, I went to middle school. The next year I was in middle school, and it was a performing arts middle school. And I enrolled in the dance class there, and then also enrolled in a studio nearby, and just loved it. I absolutely loved dance. It was such a fun way to be active, to be creative, and to work with others. And it was completely a launching pad for a lot that continued or started after that, through middle school and to today.
Wow. What made you decide to create Dancing for Diabetes? How do you start out just saying, okay, this is something I want to do? I mean, it was not that long after your diagnosis, right?
No, it wasn't. So just to go back to the timeline, 5th grade was diagnosed, 6th grade started at a performing arts middle school, and that year we had a performance through the school system, through our class, and it was a show, and it was for parents. So it was a small show, but we had this beautiful theater that sat about 500 people, and we put on a show, just part of our class. And through that process, I thought, it's crazy to think that I was 11 at the time, but I thought that, why don't we put on a show? Why don't we just put on a great, entertaining show of everyone dancing, talk a little bit about diabetes, charge people a few dollars, raise money, and give it to one of the great organizations working towards a cure and living better. And it started so small, and it just grew so much over. This fall will make the 17th annual Dancing for Diabetes, so it has certainly grown over all these years, but it just started with a little kid's idea, which is really neat.
That is really neat. I love things like that. It's just,
Absolutely.
I think, my daughter, when she was in Girl Scouts years ago, we went to a big spaghetti dinner that they had. And, the girls were like waiters and waitresses running around and serving everybody and making money. And my family, we all kind of looked at each other and said, we could do something like this for diabetes. And we do an annual spaghetti dinner now at my house. it's crazy. We don't let anybody in the house. It's a drive-through. And that's how we raise money for our walk team. But it's fun to see how, your kid has an idea or takes part in something, and then it really grows. Was there a time in the 17-year history here that you realized how big it was getting? Was there a guest or a fundraising number or something that happened where you turned around and said, how did this happen?
Yeah, so I think that it is more of just the past, I would say probably the past 5 years, just a collection of memories and instances that have occurred and people that have gotten involved. But basically just the fact that, or I should say, dance organizations around Central Florida, because we're based in Orlando, for the past probably even before that, 5 years or so, have been contacting us to be involved, to get involved with our annual show. And we unfortunately have the very good problem of having to turn new performers away because we can't have a 4-hour show. We have to keep it limited so that it's entertaining and people come back every year. But the fact that organizations and studios and dance companies are finding out about the show and the organization through word of mouth, through the dance community, through the Central Florida community, they're finding out about it through different avenues, and they're contacting us. And that I think is the piece that makes me look back and just think, wow, this is so neat. And there's a lot of families we've met along the way that come up with ideas because they get so excited to be involved with the show and the organization. And so they come up with ideas that we can do more with. So it's Dancing for Diabetes itself is the annual show, but over the past 5 years, it's grown into a full organization that operates year round, not just in the fall. We have a kids dance program. We have a bowling event. We have all sorts of different events and programs that happen throughout the year, including the conference that I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about.
Is this your job? I mean, I hate to be nosy about that, but is this your job now? Is this full time?
It is not my job. It is full time of all my free time, though. I actually am a firm director of a law firm in Orlando, so
wow.
I work crazy hours. But Dancing for Diabetes has always been a part of me. It's been the positive sort of outlook that I could spin diabetes into. And so I fill all my free time with it, and it's become, obviously it's a passion, but there's a lot of people that are involved too to help move it along and to help me dream big and execute all those dreams and goals.
Wow. So what about the other events you mentioned? You do bowling, things like that throughout the year. Is it all local in Orlando?
It is all local in Orlando. We also go to the Florida Diabetes camps and teach dance classes at their sessions. Different conferences that come into Orlando, we teach classes there as well. The bowling event's more of the families all get to come together and have a really fun afternoon. And the commonality, of course, is diabetes, but what everyone has in common and enjoys amongst each other is much more than diabetes. So it's just a neat, fun day. And we have other events like that. We have a kids' summer party, lots of opportunities to bring families together, because having type 1 diabetes, of course, as you know, and everyone else that has type 1 diabetes knows, is it's not just the person that has type 1 diabetes. It's everyone they interact with or everyone they choose to welcome into their life with diabetes.
When you see the kids who are performing, the dancers who are taking part, as you mentioned, lots of opportunities to get families together. What's that like for you? I am assuming when you were 10 years old, you didn't know anybody else with type 1, but you're giving these kids and these families an opportunity to meet people just like them.
I knew one other very small little boy. It was a friend of mine from school, her cousin, that had type 1 diabetes. And that's it. I didn't know anyone else for many years to come. So when I can see the boys and girls in our dance class, and some of the dancers have diabetes, not all of the dancers in our program have diabetes, but when I see them see one another and instantly interact, it is so amazing. We actually also produce awareness videos in the summer to release throughout the year, so that way we can reach people beyond Central Florida on YouTube and social media and things like that. And this past fall, when we were filming one of our videos, which is online, it was 3 of the girls in our dance class. And I asked them, I said, what is it like to be in the Kids with Diabetes dance program? And one of the little girls, Isabella, said that it was like there was a cure for diabetes because everyone in the room had type 1 diabetes. Everyone knew what it was like to step aside and prick their finger, check their blood sugar. Everyone knew what it was like to have a juice box. And so it was normal and it was comforting. So moments like that, and when the girls get very honest, as all kids are very honest, and they tell me these things, it is so inspiring, and it makes me want to do so much more to help them and to help their families and help those that we don't even know yet. And Touched by Type 1, I brought up the bowling event earlier because at that bowling event, and it's just such a good example of just think about what you do in your normal day-to-day life and think about how it can affect people beyond you. So we're at this bowling event. One of our board of directors members, who's also a mom of a young girl with type 1 diabetes, came up to me and said, I have a great idea. I've been thinking about it for a while. I really want to bring it to life. I really want to do something about this. What do you think? And her idea was to have a day for women affected by type 1 diabetes, whether it's yourself or your sister, your daughter, your mother, whoever it is, someone connected to you or yourself with type 1 diabetes. And so I thought about how we could do it. And that small idea of hers moved over to me thinking, how big can we make this and how fun can we make this? And that's how Touched by Type 1 started. So it's just another program under the Dancing for Diabetes organization where we're bringing in speakers from all across the country. We have people flying in. We have, of course, experts locally as well. And we have women talking about very important topics for everyone affected by type 1 diabetes, from children all the way up to adults. We have sessions such as pregnancy, exercise, transitioning to college, navigating insurance, caring for type 1, the support system that really needs to be in place to support those with type 1 diabetes. And there's all these different topics. There's about 12 different topics actually for the day, full long day out at UCF in Orlando. And we're going to have amazing presentations, but a lot of discussion, a lot of interaction, a lot of support. And there's not something like this here just for women and women's topics. So we're very excited.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll put all the information at diabetes-connections.com so people can learn more about it. I went to a women's conference here in the Charlotte area that JDRF had started putting on, my chapter. And actually I've been to two. They did one here and one in South Carolina. And they're so unique. They are amazing. It's just different. There are different issues. There's different conversations. It's really good stuff. So I'm so thrilled you're doing that. How are you doing? So you have a successful career. You have a successful second career, kind of, planning all of this other stuff. You're very busy. Do you mind talking about diabetes? I mean, how's it going for you? Oh, not at all.
I always say, stop me when you're tired of hearing about diabetes because I could talk about it forever. I mean, you know, those that are living with type 1, they instantly become experts. And it's just a matter of how many years they have under their belt and how many life events they've gone through, because there's always learning and challenges and successes with it as we grow older. And those connected to type 1 also go through all of that as well. But I am doing well. I, of course, was young when I was diagnosed, luckily had a very strict and involved mother who made sure I was testing my blood sugar, eating what I needed to, retesting when I needed to. She was on it. And then, of course, go off to college, still very involved and in tune with what was needed, but I didn't have my mom or my dad on my shoulder saying, what's your blood sugar? So maybe not the best of years with diabetes, but coming back from school and starting my career, I don't know if there was necessarily an event that took place, but there was something inside that just said, all right, you have an organization focused on diabetes. You're starting your career. You're doing all these different things. You have to be an expert on diabetes for yourself. And so I took my diabetes a little more seriously when I got back home and started my career after college. And my A1C is lower than it's ever been. And I attribute that mostly to getting a Dexcom shortly ago it's amazing. It's one of the best things that anyone with diabetes could bring on for themselves. But I'm more in tune with different parts of the day that affect me, how certain stressors and factors affect me. And so I'm more aware, and I take certain steps, and I'm very proactive. I recently got married.
Oh, congratulations.
So that's a whole new life chapter. It was actually about 2 weeks ago that I got married, and we went on our honeymoon.
Oh my.
I will say that having a very supportive spouse is really neat. Of course, we're just now husband and wife, but we've been together for several years, and it has been amazing to meet someone that has no connection to type 1 diabetes, let alone any knowledge of what diabetes is, and instantly jump on board, be supportive, grab the Gatorade bottle for me if I need it. And so it's been a fun journey in that sense too, of him becoming so involved and aware and involved with the organization and all of our events as well. So, but living with diabetes, I'm doing very well. And I know that it is 100% challenging, and every day is a different day, and who knows what's going to happen, and who knows what's going to happen when you go to sleep with a great blood sugar or a low blood sugar or a high blood sugar. And, but I've learned that you take it step by step, and you do everything you can. And a lot of times that's really all you can do, is just everything you can, because who knows what's going to happen.
I'm going to be nosy. What was your wedding like? Did you keep your Dexcom with you? Do you wear a pump? I mean, what's it like to get married with the gear, that sort of thing? Yeah.
So I wore my pump. I have a T-Slim. I wore my T-Slim, and I wore my Dexcom. And it's funny, actually. My blood sugars were great that day. I made sure I had a nice breakfast, a light lunch, made sure I actually ate something during the reception. So I was very in tune with everything that was going on in terms of diabetes. I had a whole bag of low snacks in the bridal suite just in case. And actually, during the ceremony, I handed my cell phone to one of the wedding coordinators at the wedding. And I gave her a crash course in reading blood sugars and the app on the phone. And I told her, just look at this. You don't have to worry about anything. However, if it alarms, make sure you clear the alarm. And if it's above this number or below this number, this is what you need to do. And I think I added so much more stress to her plate for that day. But I told her, don't worry. The ceremony's 20 minutes. It'll be fine. Everything was fine. But afterwards, after the ceremony, she came over to me, gave me the phone, and said, I was so stressed out the whole time. I didn't want the alarm to go off. And I told her, honestly, if my blood sugar would have gone very low or very high and it would have alarmed, that's life. I would have dealt with it. We would have pressed the button. I would have gone on with the day, and that's just what it is. So I wouldn't have been upset if the alarm went off. It's my health. So that was interesting. I did wear my Dexcom on my stomach. I am very sensitive to, I usually wear it on my arm. And I didn't, knowing that we would be visiting with so many family and friends and hugging and close quarters, I didn't want anything to happen on my arm by accident and then someone feel terrible about maybe bumping into it or pulling off or anything that could have happened. So I put it on my stomach for the day just to keep it extra safe. But it was good. It didn't impact my day at all, and it was a wonderful day.
That's fantastic. I love hearing that. Where did you go on your honeymoon?
We went to Italy for 10 days. It was amazing.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wow.
Yeah, I also have celiac. And so, of course, when we picked Italy as the destination, my first thought was, am I going to eat while we're over in Italy? Everything has gluten in it. So I did my research, read a ton of blogs, and I ate so much pasta, pizza, and bread for those 10 days. It was amazing. The food was delicious. There were many times where I had to ask my husband to taste the food just to make sure it was gluten-free because it was that good.
Wow.
And it was great. So for anyone going to Italy, I have all kinds of recommendations of where to go because it was amazing.
That's great. That really is good to know.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
That's fantastic. All right. So we've got Touched by Type 1 coming up, Dancing for Diabetes later in the year. Are you going to keep doing Dancing for Diabetes year after year?
Absolutely. I always say, and I've been saying this for many, many years, that dancing for diabetes will continue until a cure is found.
Well, I really appreciate you spending so much time with me today. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It was great to talk to you.
It was really nice talking to you. Thank you.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
More information, of course, at diabetes-connections.com. If you'd like to learn more about the conference coming up later in June, or if you'd like to learn more about dancing for diabetes. I just think it's amazing when, and I'm lucky enough to talk to people like this all the time. Somebody has an idea, and then not only do they make it work once, they put in the hard work to make it happen year after year or month after month. And frankly, I know that, again, this is a long show, but that's what all of these three guests had in common today. There was a way they saw they could help. They did it, and then they continued to do it. I mean, Sierra is just getting started. Wearing the insulin pump in the Miss America pageant was a great introduction to the world, but she is not even close to finished. Adam writes that weekly column. He's got his book, and who knows what he is going to do next. And of course, Elizabeth, full-time job, newly married, and here she goes with all of these other events that she's organizing. I just think it's amazing. And I'm so thrilled to be able to bring you their stories. If you have a story, if you'd like some attention for a group or a fundraiser that you're doing for diabetes, let me know. No pressure. You don't have to be doing it for 18 years. You don't have to, as I say at the beginning of the show, you don't have to be going up Mount Everest. You don't have to have a best-selling book. If you're just living day to day with diabetes, let me know. That's what the Community Connection especially is there for. I would love to hear from you. As I always say toward the end of the show, please, if you like what you heard, tell somebody who's touched by diabetes. Email them the episode. If you're listening in the app, I love this. You can just click the three little lines on the top left and it opens up a little menu. You can text the show to somebody. I love that. And let them know what you liked about it. Spread the word. I appreciate it so much. It really is the best way to help other people hear the stories of our community. We're not a big community, although there's too many people with type 1 diabetes. We really are a small group, and any help you could provide to spread the word about the show would really help out. I appreciate it so much. And follow me on social media, Stacey Sims and Diabetes Connections. You know the drill. And of course, all the info is at diabetes-connections.com. Lots more great stuff to come in the weeks ahead. In the immediate future, there's a lot of laundry. That's my immediate future because everybody is coming back from camp and school programs, and then it's going to be gross. But I'll talk more about that later in the summer. Benny has one more camp that he's going to be going to, and that's a regular sleepaway camp, not diabetes camp. I've talked about that before, but I'll share more once I get through the piles of laundry that are coming home in the next couple of days. I'm Stacey Sims, and I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.